listening to the NFL Draft Bible Podcast Network, part of Sports Illustrated, giving you daily NFL Draft, Dynasty, and Devy Fantasy Football podcasts.
Welcome into the draft seminar. Today, myself and my co-host John Lobb, the Gridiron Scholar, are going to be talking about quarterbacks and tight ends that have accepted their invitation to the 2021 Senior Bowl. My name is Matt Hicks at the FF_educator, director of fantasy football for the NFL Draft Bible. And like I mentioned, I'm joined by John Lobb, the Gridiron Scholar of the NFL Draft Bible and fantasy football diehards. John, how you feeling, my man? Excited to talk quarterbacks and tight ends tonight?
Absolutely. I'm so pumped. We're missing the Chiefs-Browns game because we are ready to talk Senior Bowl. I mean, I'm so into the draft process already. And what is it, January 17th? But I'm ready to talk quarterbacks and tight ends, my friend.
Hey, we are all in here 365 days a year. We're talking the draft. And John, before we get going here, I just want to mention that we are a part of the NFL Draft Bible Podcast Network. Please support our show by pressing that subscribe button if you have not already, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or YouTube. And please leave us a 5-star rating, no matter what podcast platform you're listening on. Listen, John, this is a brand new podcast platform. We've combined a lot of shows. We talked about that at the beginning of last week's episode. And I need to just share because I'm so excited, John. We debuted 28th on the charts for fantasy sports shows. So we appreciate your support, and we can break into that top 10. If you just take 5 seconds, just scroll to where you leave a review and leave a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button. We would really, really appreciate it. So, John, without further ado, here's how tonight's show is going to work. We're going to start by talking about the quarterbacks. We're going to break down each prospect, give you an introduction on them, some background information. And then we'll flip on some tape, and we'll talk about the tape and talk about how that reflects each prospect that we've talked about. Now, if you're not familiar with the Senior Bowl, if you didn't tune into last week's episode, we like to point out some of the upside in the prospects that have seen major jumps in the past from the Senior Bowl, just to really highlight how important of an event it can be. And John, when it comes to the quarterback position, and we're going to talk tight ends, I actually got really excited watching tight end tape for this, but specifically when it comes to the quarterbacks, you can't overstate the importance of the Senior Bowl and what it could mean for guys like Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, Daniel Jones, Josh Allen. The meteoric rise of Baker Mayfield really kind of put the Senior Bowl on the map in 2018. John, who are some of the most prolific or some of the most impactful quarterback runs at the Senior Bowl that you can remember?
The first one is obviously Dak Prescott. This is my 8th year studying the Senior Bowl in detail for my scholar study sheets. And I had liked the film on Dak Prescott, the production numbers that he had put up at Mississippi State. But when I saw him at the Senior Bowl, you began to see that he really had an underrated skill set. I'm not going to call anyone out. There were people who did not have Dak Prescott in their top 10 quarterback projections. I'm still shocked. I had to go to therapy, Matt, for about a year, how people could be so wrong on Dak Prescott. I had him at number 4 coming out of that draft. Then you see Carson Wentz, North Dakota State. Now, I got lucky because Carson Wentz won a national championship at North Dakota State, and he had been on the radar, so I had watched him in the playoff games. But then you saw him compete against the seniors, and you immediately began to say to yourself, this young man can play quarterback. He's going to be a top 5 draft pick. He ended up number 2 behind Jared Goff. And then there's obviously Josh Allen. He comes in from Wyoming, the Mountain West. Not a program you're ever going to confuse with Alabama. We all had heard about the skill set. You got to see him again competing with the best. And you begin to put together the profile of the player. So I like the Senior Bowl. I like to hear the reports. I like to hear what the eyes on the ground are saying. I like watching the practice sessions. And I like watching the game, obviously, when it debuts. And then Jalen Hurts last year was interesting, Matt. If you remember, he had a terrible opening day. The reports were he was so bad. And then he went to the interviews, and people said he knocked it out of the ballpark with the interview. And if you had seen, I think it was Mariucci, had Jalen Hurts on the blackboard last year on the NFL Network. And I immediately knew Jalen Hurts was an highly, highly intelligent football IQ. And you began to hear about it at the Senior Bowl. And then he progressed throughout the Senior Bowl. By the end of the week, people were impressed with Jalen Hurts, and we saw what he did last year down the stretch. And obviously, Justin Herbert. At Oregon, we wondered. The numbers they were good. They weren't impressive. I mean, they weren't like blow you away Baker Mayfield numbers. But then we heard, wow, Justin Herbert was by far the most impressive quarterback. And look at what he did. In my opinion, he's Offensive Rookie of the Year. That's another debate for another day. But Justin Herbert started to really shine at the Senior Bowl last year.
Well, John, let's go ahead and let's jump into talking about some of the prospects here that will be at the 2021 Senior Bowl. And we're going to start off here at the quarterback position and with a very controversial prospect to talk about here. Depending on what course of the last 4 years you've been at and how you felt, you could have either loved Kellen Mond at certain times, you could be absolutely over Kellen Mond, the quarterback out of Texas A&M. But there's a lot of appeal here, John, and Kellen Mond is definitely a quarterback that will find himself on an NFL roster. So why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction to the former Aggie?
The first thing I noticed doing my research, it popped off the page. If you look at the bottom, I have 5 categories that I like to judge quarterbacks on from a statistical production standpoint. Kellen Mond has played 40 games at quarterback. Now, I had seen a lot of Kellen Mond because, he's played 47 games for the Aggies. Unfortunately, when you look at the other 4 categories, Matt, he doesn't hit one benchmark. The only benchmark that he succeeds in is the number of games played. But every other one, he falls short of what I'm looking for. Now, he had a great career at Texas A&M. He leaves the program with career passing records in touchdowns, yards, completions, and total offense. He's 6'3", 217 pounds, and he started as a true freshman. Now, he is your modern-day dual threat, but he is frustrating watching him. Sometimes I feel like I just don't know what he's thinking, where he's throwing the ball or why he's throwing the ball. He did progress through his 4 years at Texas A&M, but I have my concerns. I think at best he's a backup in the NFL. My production model says Kellen Mond is not likely to be a starter anytime soon. What does the film breakdown say, my friend?
Well, John, Kellen Mond, he's an interesting guy in terms of his film because there's flashes of brilliance. He's that dual threat type quarterback, and that can definitely appeal to an NFL team. So let's go ahead and let's flip on his film here, John. If you're watching on YouTube, all of our clips, by the way, are provided by Brandon Lejeune at Devy Deep Dive on both Twitter and YouTube. And what you could see here from Mond, as we're showing kind of some of his better clips here, is that at times he really does place the ball well, but he also can throw the ball into traffic, doesn't protect the ball as well as you would like. John, you talked about that touchdown to interception ratio, and you could see some of his more successful passes are really in the first or second third of the field. Downfield, he drops off that accuracy a lot. Decent mechanics here for the quarterback position, but I think, John, where a lot of his upside is going to come at the next level is for a team looking for that mobility and that dual threat aspect.
Absolutely. He has the profile of the modern quarterback with the ability to work with his legs, but the overall production just is not there from a passing standpoint.
Absolutely here. And you can see that one deep ball. I think that's Windermere here. I think I'm more excited watching the weapons that he had around him, getting ready for Windermere next year. And you could see here, even on that deep touchdown pass, it's an underthrown ball. So he's really relying on some of his playmakers to help support him. John, let's move on here to the next quarterback who, again, is going to be a popular name. Not exactly a similar career experience as Kellen Mond, but certainly just as controversial. And I know we're split on this guy. It's Sam Ehlinger out of Texas.
Matt, I know in the summer, I like Sam Ehlinger a lot, and I had expected and hoped that he would take a major step forward. Unfortunately, he did not. And as I've been watching Sam Ehlinger, look, he's played 46 games for the Longhorns. So our first two players, we have had a lot of film, a lot of action that we've been able to watch these two young men. I now look at there was a continuum of Sam Ehlinger, Tim Tebow on one end and Ryan Tannehill on the other. And I was hoping that Ehlinger would lean more towards the Ryan Tannehill and he would keep taking a step forward this year. He just did not do it. I actually think he's now closer to the Tim Tebow side of the continuum than he is on the Ryan Tannehill. Now, 4-year starter and 2-time captain. He is a very hard player, competitive. I like his grit and determination. 6'3" and 225 pounds. I do like the fact he can play off script, and he does make plays with his legs, which we like in fantasy football, and the NFL does like because you can move the chains now. We're seeing more and more of these dual threat quarterbacks. I mean, look at those numbers, Matt. 1,903 yards rushing and 33 touchdowns on the ground. Now, he hits only one of my 4 benchmarks for passing. Touchdown to interception ratio, 94-27. I look for 3-1, and he hits it. But the other 3, completion percentage, passing efficiency, yards per attempt, he all falls a little bit short. I do believe that Sam Ehlinger will be liked by an NFL team a ton. He might slip into the 3rd round, but right now I have a 4th round grade on the Longhorn.
Yeah, John, that feels about right here, and I think you gave a really good background introduction to what his tape looks like. If we go ahead and flip it on here, dig a little bit deeper into it, for me, the upside with Ehlinger does come with his presence in the pocket. I think he has good mechanics. For me, John, I see him as a career clipboard holder, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I think he could be a really good backup on an NFL roster for a long time. Now, we could see his arm strength here. That, for me, is the biggest concern. I really don't think Ehlinger places the ball well or really pushes it much further than a 30-yard pass without it starting to get a little wobbly here. We saw that pass. That was about a 35, 40-yard pass here if you're watching along on YouTube with us. And that's probably the best it's going to get. You can see that ducks off a little bit at the end as well. He throws into coverage a lot. For me, the mental side of the game, and his 2020 tape in particular, was the most concerning. I actually thought his 2019 decision-making and ability to read the field wasn't terrible. It wasn't great, but he actually got worse, I felt, in that ability to really read a defense, work through his progressions in 2020. And that's not the direction you want to be going, right? You want to be working in an uphill trajectory. And so, especially for somebody who, like I mentioned, I think is projecting out to be mostly a career backup in the NFL. And we don't say that in a negative light by any means. That's not a terrible long-term projection for a quarterback.
Hey, we saw Tyler Huntley last night replace Lamar Jackson, and Trace McSorley was getting paid all season. So there's a place for Sam Ehlinger in the NFL. But yes, I look at him as a clipboard holder right now, and I was very bullish. I watched a ton of Sam Ehlinger this year. He just didn't take the steps forward that I had hoped.
All right, John, how about somebody who did seem to cap off his collegiate career on a much higher note? Ian Book, controversial quarterback out of Notre Dame. A lot of Fighting Irish fans were maybe a little peeved when they chose Ian Book over Phil Jurkovich now at Boston College, but it seemed to have at least worked out fairly well for them this year. How do you think Ian Book translates to the next level?
You know, Matt, it's interesting. We have a Notre Dame quarterback that isn't really on the national radar. I'm an old man. I remember Brady Quinn, Jimmy Clausen. I remember Joe Montana, one of the greatest Cotton Bowls in the history of college football. Now, I did not see Joe Theismann, but I know he played at Notre Dame, so I'm not that old yet. But for a Notre Dame quarterback to lead the Golden Domers into the college fantasy or the college playoffs and not get as much, national media, to me just shows you where the the fans think of Notre Dame, because Ian Book had a really good Notre Dame career. Look at that. He finished second all time in passing touchdowns and yards. Normally, if this was 15 years ago, Ian Book is on the cover of every magazine and newspaper, but you did not see that this year. Now, part of it is we don't have newspapers, but you understand what I mean. 6 foot, 206 pounds. A little undersized, but we've seen quarterbacks at this size succeed at the NFL level. He is a dual threat. Look at that, 1,517 yards rushing and 17 touchdowns. One of the things that I like about Ian Book, he functions well outside the play structure. When it breaks down and he has defenders in his face, he can make things happen. However, similar to Sam Ehlinger, he lacks that elite NFL arm strength. I don't see the velocity, the zip on the out passes. Now, he does hit 2 of my benchmarks that I'm looking for. Games played, 35, and touchdown to interception ratio. He's been good at Notre Dame, 72-20. But I think Ian Book is also a backup. I like Ehlinger better, but I think they're in the same bucket, Matt. What does the film say, my friend?
Yeah, I think we're going to talk about some similar tendencies here as we flip on Ian Book's film. He's good in the first and second level of the field. By the way, throwing the ball to Michael Mayer, who I'm very excited about. True freshman tight end on that last clip here. And you can see he's a winner, right? He's finding a way to get the ball into his playmaker's hands, but it's not exactly in an accurate way or a way that protects his receivers. The first 2 plays we showed, his receivers ended up getting clocked when they caught the ball. We're seeing an example here of John, his ability to improvise on the run, scrambles, is patient, not a true runner, but he can do enough to extend the play and gets a touchdown right there. I love, John, when my mobile quarterbacks can throw on the run and still remain accurate. He keeps his shoulders closed, and it's good enough to get the job done at the college level. The question is going to be, can you get away with that kind of thing at the next level?
I don't think so, my friend. I think that's going to hurt him a little bit in the NFL.
And you can see here on this play right here, he does step up into the pocket well. And he could push the ball 35, 40 yards downfield. So not the best arm in the class, not by any means, not the best arm in the class that we're going to talk about tonight. But there's enough there. And that's kind of where I feel with Ian Book. I'm not excited about him, but I think there's an NFL team that's going to take him higher than we necessarily would. I could see him making an impression and kind of getting a team to crush on him a little bit.
I agree. I think him and Ehlinger, all you need is one scouting department, one general manager to like the player, and they can move up draft boards. And I agree with you. I think one team is going to like Book and someone's going to like Ehlinger. Yes.
All right, John. Well, we didn't quite bury the lead here, but we got to talk about Kyle Trask. I think that's the guy everybody wants to see down in Mobile. And I think that the Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy and Kyle Trask are all happy that he's going to be there because he's the guy who's trying to play his way up into first round consideration here. And what a story for Kyle Trask. Did not start a game since his freshman year of high school until he took over for Felipe Franks in 2019 for the Florida Gators. And John, I'm sure you know the quarterback that he lost his job to in high school, the reason he never started?
My man, Derek King.
Miami's Derek King. So it's a good reason to lose your starting job, right? But give us the more background here on Kyle Trask.
Fascinating prospect because I see so many divergent opinions on Kyle Trask, Matt. Some people have him as high as 3. I have him outside my top 5. Some people have a first-round grade on him. I've seen him as low as a third-round grade. So he is one of the most fascinating players right now going to the Super Bowl. And his stock could rise dramatically or it could fall depending on how he performs throughout the week. It's not just about the game, folks. It's about the whole week. When I look at the production, what popped off the page immediately, Matt, he hits 4 of my benchmark stats. Look at the production has been there. Touchdown to interception ratio, 69-15. He's smart with the football, doesn't turn it over. Completion percentage, 67.9%. Now, I would like to put that into context. Florida is loaded on offense, folks. Loaded. Those numbers look better a little bit because he has exceptional teammates, but give Trask credit for getting the ball into their hands and making good decisions. Yards per attempt, 9.1. Excellent, and his passing efficiency, 168.5. Now, he's only played 24 games over the past 2 seasons because you had mentioned it. He ended up playing behind Felipe Franks, who ended up transferring when Kyle Trask became a rock star last year. But he was a Heisman finalist. He had a very good year. I will not take it away from him. My one concern is he is your classic pocket passer. I really want more mobile and more athletic quarterbacks who can gain first down with their legs. I think his athletic upside from a fantasy standpoint is limited. I don't see Trask ever rushing for like 350 yards in the NFL. Now, touchdowns, sneaking them in, maybe he could get 4 if in a great season. So I question that. But the size is there, 6'5", 240 pounds. Hey, it took him a long time to get on the field, Matt, but once he did, he earned a spot. What does the film say about Kyle Trask?
Yeah, well, John, the big reason that he earned that spot and what's going to pop off the tape pretty quickly here is that big arm. And there are flashes of brilliance from Kyle Trask, and I can understand why people get sucked in. Now, one of the things that you have to keep in mind, I understand, and especially if you're not somebody who closely follows college football, and if you are, what you'll see here is that Florida uses a lot of short passing attacks, a lot of screens, a lot of swings into the flat. And Dan Mullen is known as being a QB guru. But you look at that pass right there. He perfectly places it over the back shoulder of the defender along the sideline. One more right here against Georgia. He perfectly gets that ball up over number 2 there, defensive back for Georgia. And so there are times where you can get hooked in and say, yeah, this is Kyle Trask. You look at this mobility here. He's running the option. He reads it. He keeps. He breaks off a 15-yard play. That's pretty good for somebody who's 6'5". The concerns, though, come with the mental side of the game and really the consistency for me, John. We're showing some of Kyle Trask's best plays, but that's not necessarily always what he's doing out there on the field. So for me, he's still a day 2 guy. I definitely see the appeal. John, we're talking about...
Can we say one other thing, Matt?
Yeah, go ahead.
Those 2 throws that you looked at, remember, Kadarius Toney is exceptional and William Pitts. So, now don't take anything away from the throw. He made the throw, but he's throwing to do exceptional players on those 2. Because I watched a lot of Toney. I'm cheating for next week. But Toney is good, and so is obviously Pitts.
All right, we're covering our full bases here. We're talking about all of our quarterbacks, but we're not going to spend too much time talking about Felipe Franks because, John, I think we agree here. He graded out pretty low for both of us.
Yeah, unfortunately, Felipe Franks, he's even below Kellen Mond in my book. You look at some of the benchmark stats that I like. He did play 37 games, and he averaged 8 yards per attempt. But the other 3, he falls far short. Now, he was the starter before Kyle Trask, and he did win the offensive MVP in the Peach Bowl in 2019, in January of 2019. But he suffered a broken leg in 2019 and was replaced by Trask. The best thing about him is he is an athlete. He was drafted by the Boston Red Sox in the 31st round, but I just don't see him as an NFL quarterback, my friend.
6'6", 228, John. Do you know? Was he like a right fielder? That has right fielder all over it for me.
I think they drafted him as a pitcher, if my memory serves me well. Because he does have, I guess he has a strong arm, yes.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense there. All right, John, let's go ahead and let's talk about our last quarterback here, who is Jamie Newman out of Wake Forest or Georgia, depending on how you want to classify him. Of course, a dual threat quarterback, had a successful senior campaign with the Wake Forest Deacon Demons, decides to take that graduate transfer route lands with the Georgia Bulldogs, a lot of excitement surrounding him, and then he ends up opting out. And John, for me, preseason, Jamie Newman was somebody that I thought would play his way into the round one, day one conversation. So I was very disappointed to see him opt out. And I think that he has the largest opportunity to have his draft stock rise in Mobile. John, I do the Rookie Big Board podcast as well, and I just did an episode on my 10 biggest risers that I project from the Senior Bowl. Jamie Newman's number one. I'm all in on Jamie Newman. How do you feel about Jamie Newman?
Fascinating, Matt, because I know, like, I was Ehlinger and you like Newman. Obviously, Ehlinger's fallen down. And I wish we could have a discussion about Jamie Newman based on some film that we were able to see, but we don't have that. So when I put him into my model, and I'm not saying my model is the end-all and be-all, trust me, but it does kind of illuminate to me how I'm going to judge the prospects of a player. And Jamie Newman falls short in every category, Matt. He doesn't hit one benchmark stat. My biggest concern is he's only played 18 games. And look, again, 30 games does not mean you're going to guarantee you'll succeed, and less than 30 doesn't mean that you will fail. But it is a barometer of a player's experience and to get ready to play into the NFL. And Matt, I will agree with you on 6'4", 230 pounds. He does have the arm strength and the size of your modern-day NFL dual-threat quarterback. And I see the high ceiling. I mean, you are right. When I look at him on film, and I went back to see him at Wake Forest, and he's thrown the football to Sage Surratt and Scotty Washington, there are some really impressive throws. However, there's also a floor. And that floor comes to me from a lack of experience, not getting on the field enough. What does the film breakdown use? And obviously you're going to be looking at it from Wake Forest. What does the film say about Jamie Newman, Matt?
Yeah, let's go ahead and flip it on here. John, I'll remind everybody this film is provided by Brandon Lejeune at Devy Deep Dive on Twitter and YouTube. And I think what we're going to see, John, is a lot of what you're talking about, the big arm strength that goes along with the mobility. He throws really well on the run here. I talked about that earlier. He keeps his shoulders closed, follows through still. My big thing with Jamie Newman, and a lot of folks knock him on being primarily a rushing quarterback, but I see in his tape, he sits in the pocket first. He's looking to throw the ball. And when he throws it, he can get that ball deep and downfield. Now, he is willing to rush the ball, but I think he's a passer first and a runner second. And
I
look
agree.
at this deep throw. Look at this deep throw, John. 55 yards
nice
downfield. He steps up through the pocket. He hits his guy one-on-one, leads him very well. And let's look at the run here. Look at that vision. I mean, he looks like a running back there in terms of his vision, the way he sees holes open in the field. He's reading it very well, and he's shaking guys off. He's breaking 2, 3. He breaks 3 Duke defenders here. He looks more elusive than Kenneth Walker. I mean, come on, that's not a knock on Walker. And look at this acceleration, John. This pure acceleration downfield. He's 230. He's running like he's smaller than that, and in a good way. So I see the upside. He's not a perfect prospect by any means, which is why I wanted this year so desperately for him to clean up some of the inconsistencies.
Yeah, Matt, I see the ceiling. I agree with you. He is a pocket passer who can run. He's not, definitely different than Sam Ehlinger. Sam Ehlinger is a runner who can throw, I think, sometimes. Newman is more of a better thrower, and I agree. He might have the best arm at the Senior Bowl of the prospects.
All right, John, let's go ahead and flip over to the tight end side of things. And I know sometimes, especially in the fantasy lens, you hear the word tight end, you just tune things out. And I got to be honest with you, I wasn't excited when I said, time to flip on the tight end tape because, Evan Jordan's not there, Freiermuth's not going, Pitts isn't going. But, John, I was pleasantly surprised. I started getting actually really excited watching some tape here. And it started with the tight end from Mississippi here, Kenny Yeboah, out of Ole Miss. Talk to me about really, and you have him defined here, I think, perfectly as a wide receiver tight end prospect.
Now, I saw him at Temple, and I was surprised that he made the transfer to Mississippi. But what I'm even more surprised about, and really excited for is he became a rock star in the SEC. Now, Lane Kiffin had that offense humming behind Matt Corral and Elijah Moore. And Yeboah took advantage of the opportunity. I mean, look at his only season in the SEC. 27 catches for 524 yards and 6 touchdowns. Honestly, Matt, I think he improved his draft stock as much as any skilled position player throughout the offseason or throughout the 2020 season. 6'5", 230 pounds. Man, if he was like 245 pounds, he could be one nasty inline tight end, but he's a little bit light. But he's a move tight end. He's a hybrid wide receiver tight end. He challenges the seams of the defense. He's an underrated pass blocker. You can have him pass block. I like his ability. He's scrappy. Part of it is he played at Temple. And you're not going to get on the field at Temple if you can't run block. So he will get dirty. And look at this. I like these numbers. Catch percentage. He caught 73% of his passes. And team aerial dominator, he had 15% of the receiving yards of the running reps. I like him here. And he averaged 14.4 yards per reception during his college career. I agree with you, Matt. He's a very interesting prospect.
John, let's flip on some of this tape here and really just highlight some of his athleticism. And you can see here on this first play, he runs that post route, gets it about 20 yards downfield, and then he is gone, my friend. And that's Alabama's defense. That's not a slow group here, but once he breaks that thing off, it is over with. Absolutely breaks that thing off here. We're going to see it again. This is what I really wanted to see. They do this to him a lot. They give him the ball in the flat a lot and just let him run with it. Let him get into open space and break a guy, which is not something you would normally give right to your tight end. One of the things I found consistently through his tape, he tracks balls really well through the air. You can see those last 2 passes from Corral were underthrown. He reacts well in the air. He is a very good contested catch player, and just that focus in working through contact. He doesn't break focus easily, which is something that I really appreciate in my film review.
Yeah, I believe if he lasts to like the 4th round, he might be a steal, Matt, in the NFL draft because his ceiling is very high as an NFL prospect.
I completely agree. And I think he probably is in that day 2, day 3 range, but I don't think we're talking enough about him yet. So I'm really excited to see that momentum continue to rise. And I know the combine's going to look differently, John, but once he could start putting together some of this athletic testing, I think he will start rising up boards. Let's move on here to somebody who I think folks are more familiar with. That's the tight end out of Boston College. He really kind of flashed off the tape with some early success this season. That's Hunter Long.
Absolutely. And Hunter Long is your more classic tight end. And there will be an NFL team scouting departments. I will say there'll be a couple that absolutely love this player and this prospect. 6'5", and look at that, Matt, 253. And he's your traditional inline blocking tight end. I mean, he can collapse the linebacker and possibly the defensive end in the run game. But he is also a good route runner, and he has very soft and reliable hands. I like his catch percentage, 63% of his passes. Look at this, Matt. Team aerial dominator. 22% of the receiving yards through the Boston College Eagles went through Hunter Long. So you have a tight end here who can help you immediately in the run game to get on the field, and we like that for fantasy, and he can dominate you in the passing game. 89 career receptions, average 14.6 yards per reception. He has a sturdy frame, and he wins at the catch point using his body. I like Hunter Long a lot. I think he's off the board in the 2nd round. What does the film say, Matt?
Yeah, John, I think that lines up really well with what we're going to see here on the tape. Consistent hands for me is really the defining characteristic. And we talked about him being an inline blocker, a good NFL tight end, but I think he's going to end up having fantasy football relevancy down the road too, because he really can contribute to the passing game. Look at the way he tracks that underthrown ball. He is a really good receiver in terms of body positioning. There is not an ACC defender that was going to get around him, or, even some guys with 6'5" frames. You mentioned his frame is great. Some guys don't know how to use it. Long knows how to use it here. And so I really appreciate that about him. And you could see consistently, he's not running complicated routes, but he's getting the job done when he's asked to run routes. So I'm really excited about him. Maybe not somebody that has fantasy football relevancy year one or even year two, but I bet at some point he becomes significant.
Oh, absolutely, Matt. And I will say, the good thing about young blocking tight ends, they get on the field earlier in their career, which will give them experience down the road. And tight end is a very difficult position to learn in the NFL. So maybe by year 3, Hunter Long is really more fantasy relevant. But I do like the fact run blocking ability gets you on the field so that you get better at the NFL game.
Yes, and that's such an important point to pull up here. And John, Noah Gray is somebody that we've had our eyes on. He got a little NFL draft buzz last year, and I think he's going to fall in a similar category here as Hunter Long.
Yeah, very similar. He's 6'4", 240 pounds. He's a little bit in between, but I think he's a better inline blocker than Yeboah, who we looked at earlier in the show tonight. Now, in 2019, he had a really good season. Second team All ACC, 51 catches, 392 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He is very athletic. And what I like about him, you can move him around the formation. When you watch him at Duke, he lined up in the slot. He was placed into the backfield, and he was actually flexed outside as a wide receiver. He has strong hands, and I believe he's an immediate red zone weapon for an offense that will use him immediately. This year, put it into context, Duke was not very good at throwing the football. They had major problems at quarterback. His catch percentage was 64%, which is pretty good considering who was playing quarterback, and his team aerial dominator was 12% of the Blue Devils passing yards. I like Noah Gray. He might be a 4th or 5th round draft pick, someone you have to watch if he's in the right system that will utilize his skills, Matt.
Yeah, I think he flashes enough speed, flashes enough athleticism, John, just to keep you interested. And he could be the tight end 2 or tight end 3 on an NFL squad for a little while. But it's going to be a situation, right? Say he ends up as the tight end 3 on a squad, and it's a 2 tight end team. Well, if one of those tight ends goes down and gets injured, I think Gray is going to have enough athleticism and enough blocking ability, like you mentioned earlier, for the NFL coaching staff to trust him, get him out on the field, and then you never know what's going to happen. You never know how guys can have a meteoric rise. George Kittle, 5th round pick. So although, it might be difficult sometimes to really hone in on these tight ends, we've seen the way that value can pay off. And John, here is somebody that I am so excited about. I love this tight end. And he does fit that hybrid mold we talked a little bit about earlier, and that's tight end Kylen Granson out of SMU. Now, Granson originally was a wide receiver for 2 seasons playing at Rice, but when he came over to SMU and played for the Ponies, John, I love the Ponies, he really skyrocketed in that offense. So tell us about Kylen Granson.
The numbers are awesome when you consider that over the last 2 seasons at SMU, he had 14 touchdowns, over 1,200 yards receiving. He's been very good, and I like Shane Buechele, and everyone knows that I love college fantasy football, and Granson has been one of the best college fantasy football tight ends over the last 2 seasons. He is a little bit light at 235. He's 6'3". I definitely see him as a motion as an H-back. You can put him out wide at times. He earned 2nd team All AAC in 2019 and came back this year with a 1st team All AAC. But he has undersized with striking combination of speed and athleticism. I like him also. Very interested to see where he lands, because to me he will be scheme and landing site dependent. But I think I have a 5th round grade on him right now.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Let's look at the tape here, John, and you're going to see that athletic pass catcher. Look at that. Look at that speed.
Yeah.
Keep going, man. He really does play that hybrid type role. Don't think of him as a pure tight end in a sense. I mean, you would have thought potentially rocking that 83 number, he was a wide receiver split out wide there. And he did line up all over the field for SMU. You could see here he reacts to that Shane Buechele pass very well, keeps going after the catch. He's one of the few tight ends that I'm comfortable with running the ball in his hands after the catch here in this year's draft class. I think he's a pretty sharp route runner too, and that shows up in the fact that, again, he did play wide receiver for his first 2 years of college. Look at that catch radius there. Gets up and extends. That is a nice play over that Tulsa defender. So for me, it's a really well-rounded aspect here. You could see him laying a block there. It's not just about pass catching, but he also clears run lanes well. I think he's a particularly powerful run blocker, although he can contribute in the pass game as well.
Absolutely. His athletic profile and his production warrants an NFL team taking a shot on him. It does depend on how they use him and what coaching staff brings him up, coaches him up to the NFL level. But he has nice hands too. You showed it, Matt. He has receiver hands.
I would love to see him in a creative scheme. Put him in Kansas City. Put him in San Francisco as the second tight end, right? He doesn't have to be the guy on a team. You know, even put him in Las Vegas. You see the way they love to use the tight end. Put him as the second tight end there. You can really get some creative scheming going around. Don't get me started. Maybe put him in Baltimore, John. That'd get me really excited. Well, we have a pair of tight ends to finish this thing up here, and it's Quintin Morris and Tony Poljan. And for me, John, Poljan, the tight end out of Virginia, was especially intriguing for me. But Quintin Morris, also somebody who I know was an early guy on the radar for the Senior Bowl. So let's start off here with Morris.
I believe both of these players, their fantasy value is going to come down to draft capital. If a team drafts either one of these two young men in the 4th round, then you know that they believe in the player. If they're 6th and 7th, 6th round picks and maybe, supplemental pick at the end of the draft, then we just got to see if they even make the team. But with Morris, the athletic ability and the size, 6'4", 251 pounds. Look at that, Matt. Career receptions, 125, 1,529 yards. And my friends, Bowling Green has been terrible the past 2 years. Quintin Morris, and I'm a UConn fan, so I can tell you when a team's bad. But Bowling Green has not been good at all. So for Quintin Morris to be putting up those numbers at Bowling Green is impressive enough. He does jump out from a production standpoint.
Absolutely. For me with Morris, you see that athletic profile, you see the upside there. And so, John, I think that draft capital argument is a really good one because it's going to say how much does an NFL team believe in them. But I can tell you, like I said, I know he was early on the Senior Bowl radar, which means the NFL is interested. And, John, I had no expectations coming in and watching the 6'7", 265-pound tight end from Virginia, a Central Michigan transfer. But I was impressed with the way this big body moved around the field. I think Poljani's got some good hands. I think he is athletic for his size. I don't ever think he's going to be the tight end 1 on an NFL roster, but there is nothing wrong with being the tight end 2 and having some sneaky upside. Sneaky is the word I'm going to use to describe him because, I don't know, I got excited watching his tape. I think we might have something here.
I agree with you, Matt. 6'7", 265. I mean, obviously, you put him in motion, you flex him out in the red zone, and you get him in a mismatch with a smaller cornerback, maybe in a 2 tight end formation at the goal line. He could be a real problem. He's definitely an athlete. He played quarterback in high school. He earned 13 Phil Steele All ACC this year. Draft capital is going to tell me what the NFL thinks of Poljan.
And let's flip on his tape, John. The last tape here of the week provided by Devy Deep Dive on YouTube and Twitter. breaks off a nice route there. Like I said, he's not going to be the fastest guy in the room, but consider the fact he's 6'7", he gets going pretty quickly. He gets his body moving. I mean, look at this. 2 Tar Heel DBs draped over him, and it just did not matter. He's the type of guy that you're just going to put that fade in the end zone, right? Just fade it over his shoulder in the end zone, and we know how valuable those touchdowns are. Not fazed by traffic, not fazed by contact. You get the ball in his radius, which is a large radius, and you're going to be happy with the result from him.
Absolutely. He has a spot. I think he looks like a practice squad player early in his career to me, who might blossom 3 years down the road.
Right, exactly. And you look at the way this man lays out. He lays out, and I swear he goes 10 yards just by diving forward. So he's also a good blocker. I think that's really important too, because like we mentioned, that's going to get him on the field. But I think he does well to shoot off the line of scrimmage. At times, he gets a little too high in his set to start. But you can see here he keeps his hands inside. He's got good technique when he locks in on the defender, and he's able to move guys around the field, uses that body well. So, John, that's a lot. No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I saw him blocking. I think he jumps high too much. If
he gets a little quick out of his stance,
Yeah, if you get a coaching staff, then get him lower. Low man wins. I mean, I know that's an old school term, but I feel like he gives up the low position. Now, part of it is he's 6'7", but if he could make his technique a little better in the run blocking, then he gets on the field more often.
Absolutely. Well, John, that's a lot of guys we talked about here. Well over a dozen quarterbacks and tight ends. We're going to finish up our Senior Bowl preview series next week with the wide receivers, and oh boy, are there wide receivers to talk about. So that's going to be a really good episode. And then, John, we'll be on to the rookie profile series. So I'm really excited about that. Again, this is a brand new endeavor that we are on here with the NFL Draft Bible Podcast Network, presented by Sports Illustrated. So please, if you enjoyed this podcast, please take 2 seconds, leave us a 5-star rating. If you want to leave us a review, we would really appreciate that as well. But that 5-star rating helps us so much. If you're watching on YouTube, leave us that like, subscribe. Yes, 5 stars, please. We really appreciate it. It helps so much, and we appreciate you listening. We look forward to jumping back into it next week to talk about wide receivers for the Senior Bowl.